It is March 20th, 2018. We are at the New England Conservatory. My name is Charles Peltz. I'm the president of the Gunther Schuller Society and a faculty member at the Conservatory. We are here to record for the Gunther Schuller Society Oral History, Video History Project. We are here today with James Terry, who was on the Board of Trustees when Gunther Schuller was hired and has a very long and distinguished history with the New England Conservatory. I think the first thing I'd like to ask you, Jim, is what was it like in the years when you were searching? You were on that original search committee. What did you think you were looking for when that process began? And then how did it unfold, the process that brought Gunther to NEC?
Well, the search was the outgrowth of approximately 5 years of Chet Williams having been president. And I came in actually on the day that he was inaugurated as president. I had happened to do some legal work for the conservatory in connection with the much maligned dormitory that is now being transferred into practice space. And I had therefore attended trustees meetings, not as a trustee, but in order to, and I got some impression of the board and how it was functioning and how it was not functioning. And I'm backing up a little bit, but when the GI Bill ran out, the tuition income of the conservatory ran out with it. And they really faced a very difficult situation. They had a good reputation, but not a superior reputation in some areas and not in others. And Chet Williams was asked to be president because his predecessor, Alifaris, I don't know, he had done something wrong and he left. And I remember, because I knew Chet quite well by that time, that this was uncomfortable for him. He was the best number 2 person in the world, and he just was not a number 1 person. He accomplished a great deal, but he knew it. And so he actually triggered the search by saying, "Look, I'm not the right person for this. I'd be glad to help, and I hope you'll let me stick around," which Gunther was generous enough to do. But that was what started out, and the school had no endowment to speak of at all, and no other source of funds except tuition. And with the GI Bill going away, that was in serious jeopardy. They were looking for, as every presidential search that I've ever seen, looking for someone who could walk on water and do anything else that was useful. And so we were looking for someone who could do everything because we needed everything to be done. And so that was it. The search committee interviewed people in the musical area. I don't remember whom. I remember Robert Schumann,
William Schumann.
William Schumann. Yeah,
Sure.
William
Right.
Schumann. I remember he was one of the people we talked to, and anyway, we were busy trying to scout and figure out who might be available. And what happened was that the chairman of the board, Sherwin Badger, I don't know by what means, perhaps even by accident, ran into an opportunity to talk to Gunther, who was then abroad. He was I think he was in England, I don't remember where, and was going to come back, but had no commitments. And so he thought, this is crazy, but maybe he'd be interested. And it turned out, and I don't know anything except the result, that he came back from having seen Gunther with saying this, and so the search committee obviously ratified it and approved it. It was wonderful. He had stature, and he didn't have any administrative experience at all.
Was that a topic when the ratification was taking place? Were there committee members, search committee members, who were concerned that Gunther did not have that administrative experience, or did the artistic so far outweigh that?
Well, we knew that of all the walk on water capabilities that a president ought to have, that administration was the easiest to find someone else to do. You weren't going to find anybody with no gaps,
Right.
and omnicompetent, and that much easier to do that. And along with it, because that was obviously discussed with Gunther, that was the motivator of the appointment of Harvey Phillips and Don Harris, who came on really as not as co-presidents at all, but they came on as his staff. And that was a very interesting dynamic, because he was they were more like the White House staff than they were like officers of the conservatory. And that,
What do you mean by that? That's an interesting,
well,
distinct discretion there. What?
yeah. Well, they were the president's men. They were
Got
not the conservatory's men.
Yes, no, I understand.
In that way. And over the course of that decade, of course, that evolved and changed, and fascinating story in terms of all three of the individuals involved. But let's not go there unless you want to.
Oh, no, actually, maybe we didn't have a lot of opportunity. We didn't go into long discourse before the interview. We are interested in a historical context in which we're going to hear things that we would not read. That there are backstories, and that's important to get a whole picture of the institution, and in some ways that illuminates Gunther in particular ways that might not be seen. And you have a very unique perspective, you and the other board member that we've interviewed, and we've discussed the fact that if there are things that you mention or talk about that we find to be uncomfortable, we have no trouble adding those. So feel free to do that.
Well,
this isn't hagiography. We're not sycophants, although we admire him so much.
The players, with conservatory, given its financial condition, its reputation, the whole enchilada, and Gunther, with his strengths and experiences and lack thereof, it was really, this is my hindsight, but it was really more like a merger than it was like appointing a president. It was really more like that in terms of the way it felt.
In what?
It was just because we were, the conservatory and Gunther were kind of equals in terms of reputation, capabilities, and so forth and so on. So it was that in that way. Gunther never pretended to have any capacity for administration or for running anything, but he came in with a very plain view that I have no interest in running a second-rate conservatory. And if that's what you want, get somebody else. That was at the floor and throughout, and got expressed in several ways in the course of events. And he also took the position, all entirely justified, that it was not his job to raise money or to administer. That was the trustee's job. We had, in fact, a decent board, but not a board that had ever had to do much of anything, and not a rich board. So we did not have a group of people who had capability to fundraise at the board level either. And so that was a problem, obviously. And Gunther was necessary to raising money because he was Exhibit A, and he didn't want to do that. That was always a tussle because he didn't want to spend time doing that kind of thing. I didn't blame him. But it was, and so you have the board with the responsibility for finding a way to administer the place and to raise money. Gunther with his responsibility and attitude that he's interested in a first-class music school, and if the board won't find a way to do what's necessary to achieve that, he's not interested. That was the that's and this was not one party having total. If anyone had more control than the other, it was Gunther had more control than
by just force of personality.
Well, no, just by force of the situation.
All right.
The situation was that, and because he was obviously by foresight and by hindsight qualified to make the place into a first-class school, and he was not replaceable that way. At least we didn't think so. If he was, we didn't know it. And that was the dynamic. In that context, you had the administration in the hands of Don Harris more on the academic side, and Harvey Phillips on the administrative financial side. And that they, as I said, were Gunther's people starting. And anyway, that was I mean, he hired them or just wanted them hired, and so that's the scene. And where was I going? Where do you want me to go from that?
Well, that's fine. So we understand that at the you've described what it was like when Gunther was engaged and the rules of engagement, and so now he has been inaugurated. He is now president. As a board member, what did you see unfold? Was it Vesuvian? Was there a warm-up period? Did he spend much time sort of getting the lay of the land, or did he decide that he was just going to landscape immediately? How did it feel to be a board member when Gunther took over and be responsible for the fiduciary health and?
Well, that's very complicated. He started doing his main focus, as far as I'm aware, was hiring faculty, and hiring faculty required resources, and so it required a budget and so forth. Everybody was totally unused to a budget, and we were used to not getting a budget. The first time we got a budget was when we got the audit report.
And so what was there? Now what you'd planned for?
It was primitive, to say the least. I think that the financial person we had was the buildings and grounds man, and he did this kind of out of a little notebook. There was the president and the president's secretary and the buildings and grounds guy, and that was it. There wasn't any other administration.
No kidding.
No, it was just nothing there. But so everybody started doing their thing, and there were a lot of bumps along the road. The progression through the decade was that both Harvey and Don, working for the conservatory, naturally developed all kinds of affection for the place, all kinds of loyalty to the institution. And there were times when that loyalty conflicted with their loyalty to Gunther because whatever reasons.
Yes, right.
Because there would be disagreements about things. And sometimes they would find themselves agreeing with what the board was saying, instead of what Gunther. And this was personally very, very, very hard on both of them. And they were very different kinds of people that dealt with that problem in opposite ways.
How did Gunther? Because we're trying to. This could be a fascinating story in itself about those two.
Yeah.
But how did Gunther respond to the evolution of these two men as more institutionally attached, or affectionate, and having to face these two people whom he brought on, who occasionally now.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
You didn't see it played out in meetings
no,
or anything.
I don't know. I don't know what his conversations with them might have been.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. I know what his conversations with the board were. I was in the fortunate position of being secretary of the board at that point, at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I guess at the end, I was chairing the executive committee and was kind of the number 2 person under Bill Driver, I think it was. But I was an intermediary between the board and Gunther, really during the entire time. I was in between, I was in the middle place.
See, that begs a great deal of narrative. So, did you find, what was it like dealing with this rather Vesuvian creative person and a board that needed, apparently, from the way you say they were at the beginning, to be sort of dragged along to modernize and to make themselves a functioning body? What was that like, and how did Gunther respond when you would go to him and lay out a problem? What was was he, did he look for compromise, or did he simply respond? I mean, how did he respond to the interactions with the board in your messaging?
I can't think of particulars really, but I've never worked with anyone who was as good to work with as Gunther was. Right, work with and work against. I was almost an ambassador from the board, and in a lot of these, and it was frequent that I would discuss with him things that where there was some ruction between the two, or some disagreement between the two. And usually, I think that I said, "We got to do this," and the trustees said, "Well, we can't. We'd love to. It's a great idea, but we can't do it. We're not able to do it." And he would say, "Well, it's not my job. It's your job. So figure out how to get able to do it." I mean, that was all. That was.
Was that a fairly common sort of script? That was
well,
and I don't mean to say it that way.
In substance, in substance, that was the tension, because the fact was that Gunther was right, that the only thing that was worth doing was what he wanted to do and was able to do, but he needed financing, he needed resources, he needed that in order to do it, and the board was not able to do it. And that was the fact of the matter.
Yes.
Nobody was mistaken or that, and it wasn't because they weren't trying hard or anything. And the process of building a board to create resources and to bring in people who can help and persuade people they should have, all of that is a lot. And we didn't have any particular skills on the board. I think David Scudder was a miracle worker on the development side, and he was like the principal, David Crockett before him, but he was the one who brought David in, and they were board members, but they had some knowledge of the field of fundraising, and had a lot of contact with the people who were worth talking to if you were fundraising, and they were kind of the lead people on that side of it. On the financial side of it, we had again young employees of the First National Bank, which was then they were trustees and served as treasurer, and they did what they could to help with budgeting and so forth whenever there was. There was one rather critical meeting, I think the second or third year, I don't remember just when they brought in the budget, which showed endowment income as income and showed scholarship sources as income. Trouble is, one of them
Is-
is the opposite
Yes.
of the other. And so they had double counted, and they had a budget which was, I don't know, was balanced, but it wasn't seriously unbalanced. But if you counted it right, it was,
Terribly out of whack.
terribly out of whack. And several board members said, "This is too risky."
Mhm.
And resigned. But that was an example of the kind of thing that happened because of the inadequacies of the
Mhm.
various excusable inadequacies. It
Right.
wasn't our fault that we weren't born rich or born knowing how to do all of these things. We just happened to be on the board.
Mhm.
You know? So that was it. But in Gunther's role in this, so there were many times when I was really, pushing him and disagreeing with him and saying, no, we can't do that, and you just can't have it. Sorry, but
Mhm.
there's no point going in a huff. We got to figure out how to deal with that. And we could have a knockdown, drag out argument about something, and however it came out, my way or his way or whatever, the next totally forgot. Absolutely, he could have,
Mhm.
if he'd said, "I don't like talking," he
Right.
could have gotten me fired
Right.
in an instant.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And he was absolutely wonderful to work with because you get right down. He didn't mind being
Mhm.
pushed, and he wasn't, he wasn't. He was forceful, and he defended his own position, but never with any unreasonableness.
Mhm.
And he's obviously a really brilliant person,
Yes.
and he didn't have any trouble seeing what the problem was, but he was strong enough not to let himself be put in a position of doing something that he knew he wasn't good at doing and didn't want to do. And he could have caved,
Mhm.
but I don't think he could have. I mean, because I don't think it would have been sustained. And then when it wasn't sustained, he would have left. The experience of working with him throughout this incredible decade was one of the great experiences of my life. Really,
Were most of
marvelous man.
yes.
Never mind. I mean, his music, all of that good stuff.
Well, when he the kind of things that he would bring to the board that the board would sometimes have to say, no, we don't have the time or the money to be able to support, or the resources.
Mhm.
Were they usually the large ideas, or were they small projects, or was he often bringing the big things like the beginning of a jazz department, which would require an entire new set of faculty? I mean, that's a very large commitment. And how did the board respond to the big ideas? I guess let me ask that question. Things like being the first jazz program in the country. Were there reticences on the part of the board to these things, or did they say, no, that's what we hired him
Not
for?
much. I mean, I don't think there was any opposition to the ideas. Or there may have been some. There may have been some who thought it was not a good idea, but not. Well, I think there was no desire to sort of fight with them on those issues, and so the financial effect was simply cumulative.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that starting a jazz department was any more expensive than strengthening other departments.
It just was.
It was just part of the hiring that he felt was necessary in order to create the kind of a music school that was worth working for.
Right. Now tell me.
So I don't think, and it wasn't an item to item kind of thing. It was always, here's this whole business that you want to do. Well, we can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
So, how about not doing this or not doing that? It was that kind of a conversation. There wasn't any overarching
Right. Resistance or support of anything. It was very.
Yeah.
So tell me about the fateful period of some weeks when the money eventually truly ran out, and the pink slips were inked
Ready.
at the ready, and then a foundation saved the conservatory. What was that like, taking minutes at those meetings? And how did it work out in your mind as you saw it unfolding?
Well, I guess I'm not going to get the particulars right or the details, but the order of things was we had to decide whether we should open the school and admit students at a time when it was not clear that we would have the resources to keep going through the year. And I got this fellow lawyer to research the subject of what the trustee's obligation is to do in a situation like that. And he prepared a very careful legal memorandum and saying essentially that it's not risk-free to do this, but it's not beyond the pale. It's not beyond the pale, so you're supposed to exercise your best judgment as to what's best for the institution, for the charity you're on, and is it better to say we failed, or is it better to say we think it's still possible that we can succeed, or still more likely that we can succeed? And you've got to make that judgment with the best interests of the institution in sight. And it was not an easy question. But the board, I think there was unanimity in the board that it was not the best thing for the institution to shut it down. And even though we couldn't tell them that there was no personal risk in going forward, they felt that this was a risk they ought to take, that their fiduciary duty was on the side of taking the risk rather than not taking the risk. And I felt very strongly that that was the right answer, and I guess the board felt very strongly.
Were you involved in the solicitation of, was it the Ford Foundation? Was the agency that
not peripherally?
Oh, I see.
Peripherally, yeah. David Scudder was the biggest part of that, and the only thing I had to do with it was there was one time when we had to go down. The conservatory had to send people down to the Ford Foundation to talk with Oleg Lobanov about whatever was on his mind, and it was a very critical meeting. And David went down, and they wanted me to go with it, and I knew nothing about nothing. However, and so he was there, and I guess I was supposed to be there so that if he did anything that was clearly jailable, I would stop him. I said this, I can say it freely now, because I said it in introducing his honorary degree that he got later on, that Oleg asked a number of questions about what they're thinking, that the conservative, they ought to do this or we ought to do that. And David was very quick and clear and short, saying yes to this, no to that. And I was really impressed with the way he handled that. It was absolutely clear that he was a complete straight shooter, which is important. You know, if it had been a clue that he was being careful about anything, you know, it probably would have been the end of the game. And he was clear and say, yeah, no, that's impossible. We can't possibly do that. And he was clear on that. And I was very impressed. with it. But he really did it.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I had been equipped with his knowledge, I don't know that I could have done it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of I don't know, temperament but he's just wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And so he deserves all the credit in the world.
Did Gunther go to that meeting with you? No. He stayed here in Boston, waited for the phone to ring.
No, nobody did.
Mm-hmm.
And Gunther, again, I guess he talked to them when he had to. I don't know whether he ever went down to New York. But he was. That was his reclusive side.
Right, yeah.
Was talking to the fundraisers.
Right.
That wasn't what he wanted to do, and
Right.
so he avoided it as much as he could.
Do you feel that the board, at the conclusion of his time after his 10 years, did the board who was there then, and any board members who were on his hiring who may have gone off the board in that interim, did they all feel that they had really done the right thing, that they had made not only an impactful hire, but they'd made a unique and sort of game-changing hire in a larger world than just the New England Conservatory?
Oh yeah. No, I think so. Oh yeah.
And they were, and so there were no sort of sense of regret about the fact that there were these financial.
No. I mean, that's not something to regret. I mean, it's like being in a war. You know,
Right.
You're going to get hurt if you're in a war, but that doesn't mean that you didn't win the war. No. There's no feeling of regret over his administration. We were sorry to see him leave.
I was going to say, tell me about what it felt like the moment. Was there an inkling that he was going to be leaving?
Oh yeah.
And so you saw. When did the board start to feel that maybe he was getting itchy, and that this?
It wasn't that. I mean, he was back up to 7 or 8 years into his tenure,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. We came to a real. And I was chair of the executive committee, and we had a special meeting just before Christmas because Gunther had resigned. Told us he was resigning.
And did he give a reason?
Yeah, I don't know what the reason was, but
Okay.
it was this whole back and forth and so forth and so on. It gets very same old. And I don't know that there's some straw that breaks the camel's back, but it's not important what it is. I have no recollection of what it was. What specific it was. And the special meeting was called in order to talk to Gunther about this. And that morning, I opened the Globe, and in it was a cartoon, Broomhilda.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that cartoon?
I do.
That cartoon was a spread all in one thing. The picture was of Broomhilda laughing down in the little corner like that. Santa Claus and his sled and the reindeer. And the reindeer, some of them were on their backs, some of them pointing frontward, some of them were pointing sideways, some were pointing backwards. And the caption says, "Who the hell hooked up my reindeer?" And it was absolutely perfect. I ran to the office, got it copied, Xerox, put it face down on the table around, and told nobody can sneak a look until we start. The first order of business was to turn it over and look at this cartoon. And the tension just evaporated. It perfectly stated our problem. And we were all hooked onto this sled, and we were behaving just like these reindeer. It was just classic, and it was perfect. And we laughed, Gunther laughed, everybody laughed. I said, okay, let's get the reindeer. And that really solved it.
It did, and that was in year 7 or 8. But
Something
then
but he was quite clear that he was going to retire at the end of the decade.
At the end of a decade.
Yeah, yeah. And I've forgotten whether year 7 or 8 or even 9 that he said this, but it's somewhere in the
Right.
in that period. Maybe closer to 9 than to 7.
Was there a concerted effort on the part of the board to keep him, or was there a concerted effort on the board to find a way to keep him either through personal entreaties?
Beyond the decade?
Yeah.
No, we kind of regarded that as the deal.
Oh, I see.
I mean,
was that in any way outlaid at the beginning, or were there no term limits at the beginning because you were simply trying to get this ship moving?
Yeah.
But after a certain point, the decade started to become a milestone that people recognized.
Yeah. Well, I think Gunther said it, or maybe, I don't remember how it came to it, but it was a good way to say, okay, not everything's going my way, but I'm going to set limits, and so it was essentially agreed that to tear up the resignation, and
Right.
And so everybody was prepared for that,
Mm-hmm.
and expected it, and we didn't try to talk him out of it because it was clear that he had the best reasons. So he'd given his best shot. It was essentially done.
Yeah.
And he wasn't particularly interested in sort of managing the result.
Right.
Well, that wasn't his role. His role was to reshape the school.
Right.
And he'd pretty much done it.
Now, there's an interesting. I just thought of this question, and the answer will be interesting to me. You've just had this great sea change with this innovative person in a time in the culture when old institutions were being remade by a number of very important and creative people.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been sort of a vanguard in doing that at this music school.
Mm-hmm.
Now the board is now faced with hiring the next person. Was there a sense that we must keep this legacy, this inertia going, and therefore we have to find someone who's going to sort of be the Gunther heir and accept that trajectory? Or are we going to say that rather there was an energy provided by Gunther Schuller, and we're going to find the next person is going to take that energy in directions that may not be what Gunther might have wanted, but we're going to hire them to be their own person? What was because you've been in institutions where they say, no, we want to do exactly what we're doing now and further it. And other ones say, well, every regime change is an opportunity for new directions to be explored. Was there a sense of any of that on the board?
No. The sense was quite clearly that what we wanted was someone who would manage, not hands off on making changes, but who would manage the reshaped institution that Gunther had really done. Though again, that job wasn't finished,
right?
But it had been designed, and the ideas behind it, the philosophy behind it, the whole basic notion that you're not going to have a good school unless you have the best faculty, and you're not going to keep the best faculty unless you can also get the best students. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, so that's the job. Okay, and you can talk in all different ways, and there aren't. As long as that's the North Star of what you're looking at, you can make a lot of mistakes along the way without having a critical mistake.
Yes.
And there was no feeling at all that we didn't have the right North Star.
Yes.
I mean, there was absolutely no feeling of that. And so we were looking for a manager. And that was a very important time for the conservatory because obviously Gunther's reshaping of the institution, remodeling of the house had disrupted people.
Yes.
And there were obviously, and I don't think it's an important part of it, but there were some faculty members that were here when Gunther came that were not at his standards of excellence. Mm-hmm. And they obviously felt threatened. And there at one point there was an attempt to start a union and something like that. And thank goodness they did not have a labor lawyer in the firm, and so put that job on another firm, which was I hadn't realized it at the time, but by hindsight, that was invaluable in terms of my capacity to be of any further use to the place. Because if I'd been on one side of an internecine war,
Right.
That would really have been bad. And because I wasn't on anybody's side, again, I was in a sort of a neutral position and retained an ability to work with faculty, which was very important.
Yes.
I was actually the chair of the search committee after Gunther, and it was mostly an internal reorganization. We had an advisory of about 10 faculty members, I think, including some that Gunther brought and some that he hadn't made and succeeded in firing.
Yeah. Did those two factions get along in that search process?
Yeah, well, they got along well enough to participate in the process, and I think the process was very helpful in terms of the faculty, because they were importantly involved, and the results of it were not happy. I think the process of it was very happy for the school.
Do you, on a sort of a large issue, and the question is going to sound a bit like a softball, but did Gunther was an inspiring person.
Sure.
He inspired people around him, as well as intimidated them, and often those two things were like two parts of epoxy that made it work.
I suppose, yeah.
Do you feel that the board was inspired by him? Did you sense, because you had been on the board before, that this energy that he brought, this vision that he brought, took people who might have been a little more moribund at the beginning and actually inspired them to look to Boston as not being as provincial as some accused Boston of being at the time, into being more cosmopolitan? Did he change them as people, as he often changed musicians as people? Or am I fishing for something that might not really be there?
Well, I don't know. I don't. I think the board agreed with what he wanted to do, and it was very whatever differences of opinion were not major. And they were obviously excited and inspired by the fact that it seemed to be possible that this not only that it could become a solvent school, not avoid bankruptcy, but also be a school that was really worth having. And that, of course, was very inspiring to people. And I think the dedication of people, all the constituencies to the school, has been extraordinary during that whole time. And not only the board, also the faculty, also the students. When the stories we heard of the kinds of sacrifices that the students and their families had to make in order to be here, and the willingness of the faculty to endure all kinds of low pay, low privileges, fear of instant extinction, bankruptcy, and so forth and so on. It's absolutely extraordinary.
Right.
And of course, that's what did it. And Gunther was very much an energizer. But as soon as people were energized, they contributed to the energy, which is what made it all happen.
What would there be any sort of concluding, because we're near the end of what we normally do for these.
Yeah.
Are there any concluding thoughts, things that as you've thought about coming over today, that you wanted to make sure that were put into the history?
I don't. I mean, there are lots of. You could spend hours giving credits to all the people who helped. In all constituencies, and so forth. I mean, look at some of the people you know best on the faculty. And
right. Exactly.
How they behaved during this whole time. It was just miraculous. But I don't think so. I guess I've tried to lay out what the war was and what the battlefield was, because that was absorbingly interesting.
Well.
And of course, because people were so committed and interested, of course it affected their lives.
Well, you've been the Bruce Catton of
Well.
laying. You've been the Bruce Catton of laying out the war. Andrew, we have a gentleman here in the room who's been part of many of these interviews and has a great knowledge of the conservatory as well. Andrew, is there any question that you'd like to see asked?
Maybe just what was Gunther like to work with on a personal level?
Wonderful. I mean, I didn't have that. I mean, I guess I had experienced a couple of all-nighters with him, for one reason or another, and his ability to get along on an average of 3 hours sleep or whatever it was
Astonishing.
was just absolutely astonishing. And he had the most unruffleable personality, and all of the quirks that are usually allied with greatness, he seemed to be missing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
It's just really,
Right.
really quite amazing.
Yep.
And his basic ethics were just superior, and he never let personalities or slights or disagreements or anything like that get in the way of it. He never let himself get encumbered by these things. As a person, he says, there aren't many people that I've worked as closely with over as long a period of time as I have with Gunther, and this is just a remarkable experience. I guess I've had similar experiences with some of the faculty and some of the other board members associated here who have been, we've been in the trenches together in an endeavor which has been so magnificently worthwhile. Yes.
What a great couple of words to end, right? Magnificently worthwhile. This has been an interview for the Oral History Project of Gunther Schuller, sponsored by the Gunther Schuller Society. This is an interview with James Terry, longtime New England Conservatory board member and colleague of Gunther Schuller's. The date is March 20th, 2018.